Thank you for joining us for this morning's webinar, Path of Trash from Charleston to the Atlantic Ocean. Today's webinar is being presented by the West Virginia Project WET Program and Watershed Improvement Branch of the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection and the City of Charleston Stormwater Program. My name is Tommy Bergstrom and I'm with the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. I work with the Watershed Improvement Branch as the Western Watershed Basin and Project WET Coordinator out of Charleston. And I'll be explaining this term watershed pretty soon, so hopefully that'll give you a better idea of what we work with.
And hello, everyone. I'm Leanne Grogg. I'm with the City of Charleston. I work in the Stormwater Department, Public Education and Outreach. And thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to ask the question, what are we talking about? We're going to talk about in this webinar what we do, what Tommy does for the DEP, and what I do for the City of Charleston. What is a watershed? How water enters and exits Charleston, types of water pollution, a brief history of plastic, some local examples of local and worldwide impacts and efforts to reduce pollution, and we're going to talk about our funky FestivALL Fish Find. So Charleston Stormwater Program, what do? We have a permit through the DEP, and we are required to do 6 things. 2 of the 6 things involve the public. One's public education, which is what we're doing here. The other is public education and public participation, and where we try to encourage citizens of Charleston to actively participate in the reduction of stormwater pollution. That can be through a lot of things. We're going to talk about some of those, what you can do as we go on through the webinar. Here's some examples of some of our programs that we've participated in the past, specifically for FestivALL. We have on the left picture, you can see that we are talking about straws and plastic pollution, but specifically straws, and we have some options for some better choices when it comes to using straws other than plastic straws. And to the right is what's called our bag monster. There are actually a lot of them across the country. It kind of brings awareness to the amount of plastic bags an average shopper uses in a year, 500.
And so at the Department of Environmental Protection within the Watershed Improvement Branch, you might be wondering, well, I don't really know what that means either and what they're doing. So of course, Department of Environmental Protection means you're supposed to be protecting the environment. And within the Watershed Improvement Branch, we would, of course, then be working with water. And when we look at our environment, I always like to point out to people that there's just so many things in our environment. There's air, there's the wildlife and the flora and the fauna. There's plants and water and the people and the structures. We just have so much in our environment that it's impossible for one agency to protect it all. So we really lean on the citizens of West Virginia to help us protect our environment. And the environment we're going to be talking about today is water. So what is a watershed? This is a question that we ask a lot of folks, and we try to share knowledge on this a lot because it's something that's overlooked a lot in our school systems. So we really like to bring it to light. It's just simply a common body of water. So it's small streams flowing down into a larger stream or river, and then it has a common outlet that's usually called the mouth. But I like to refer to a watershed simply as a drainage basin. And so whenever water lands on a slope, it's going to flow downhill. And of course, that's due to gravity. And if we start thinking about how that might look on a geographical area, especially in West Virginia, where we have so many mountains and ridges and low valleys, the water can really shed down into these small areas. So we can have really small geographical areas, so small watersheds, and we can also be part of larger ones too. And these images are just part of our Project WET activity, Seeing Watersheds, where we dive into this a little bit deeper. And this is an example of something you can do at home with your kids or your students, or if you yourself are a youth, you can try this out at home. Get a piece of wax paper and take a marker across the top of it, or put some food coloring across the top of it. Just fold it in half, like demonstrated here, and then take a spray bottle and spray onto it. And you'll see that the water is going to shed either onto the left side or to the right side. And it's a really nice visual of what actually happens whenever it does rain. So why are we talking about watersheds, and why is this term so important for people to know? It's important because we all live in a watershed. Wherever you're at on planet Earth, you are part of a geographical region. So that means you're part of a watershed. And watersheds provide really important things to us, like places to recreate. Sometimes our drinking water is on the surface water right there where we can see it. So in Charleston, we get our drinking water out of the Elk River. We also have a lot of navigation and industrial activities there. So you might see people in pontoon boats or fishing boats, but you might also see a barge. So it gets utilized for a lot of different activities. And then of course we have food and habitat and water for our wildlife and our flora of West Virginia. So these watersheds drain surface water, groundwater, wetlands, and more. So it encompasses all of these different properties. And everything flows downstream. So when we think about who is upstream of us, if we look at the Elk River, then we have people all the way in Pocahontas County, where the river originates, and it's flowing through lots of beautiful country land until it reaches into Charleston and dumps into the Kanawha River. If we're looking at the Kanawha River, it's part of where the Gauley and the New River form together. They flow together to form the Kanawha River. So if we think upstream about what might be impacting us downstream, that's really important, but also it's important for us to think about who's downstream of us and how we might be impacting them. So just again, to make sure that this point gets across, wherever you're at on planet Earth, you are in a watershed. And you can find out the exact name of that watershed by visiting this USGS website. You could just type in your zip code and it can tell you what small watershed you're part of and then what larger ones you're part of as well. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit today too. And if you have an activity or if you have some time and you'd like an activity for maybe your children or your youth to go through, Project What does have a free interactive website right now up, and the website is listed right there. And you can go through our Seen Watersheds activity. So this is something that you can share. So how does water enter Charleston? It can enter through groundwater. So the Kanawha River, for example, whenever it starts to get low because it hasn't been raining, there's groundwater aquifers that will shift water over into our river to keep a base flow in it. That's why we don't ever see it bone dry, because of our groundwater, and also the water flowing down from upstream. Additionally, precipitation, so rain, sleet, or snow, which we get quite a bit of here. And then of course, surface water. So whenever the New River gets a lot of rain in it, that's going to flow down to us. Same with the Gauley River and all these little tributaries, and same thing with the Elk River. So in Charleston, we're a pretty neat town in that we have two major river systems meet together. So the Elk River flows into the Charleston River right in Charleston, which is pretty cool. Right into the Kanawha River, sorry, right in Charleston. And in West Virginia in total, if you look at our state, we have a lot of really beautiful blue watersheds across the whole state, which is pretty unique. Not most states look like this. But we have over 9,000 streams, over 32,000 stream miles, and over 32 major watersheds. So where my star is located here, that's where Charleston's at. And you can see this really big shape file here to the right of it that I'm highlighting with my mouse. That whole area there is just the Elk River watershed. So all of that huge, massive river system is draining into the Kanawha River right here. And the Kanawha River is down through here. And then we have the New and the Gauley down there as well. So it's a pretty large system, and it's neat that it flows right through our town. So water exits Charleston mainly through surface water, so through our rivers and our streams and our creeks. It flows out of our state, but also in our aquifers. And we have a pretty neat thing that happens in West Virginia, the Continental Divide, which if you want to think back to that wax paper ridgeline that we looked at earlier, imagine that folded across the arm of our state right here, the Eastern Panhandle. And so all the water that flows to the left side or to the west side is going to flow out into the Ohio River and the Mississippi River. So it's actually 47 counties total. And then over on the right side or the east side, we have around 8 counties, and all of that water sheds out into the Chesapeake Bay. And a really neat thing about West Virginia is that we have 8 rivers that originate in one county. So we are really a water-rich state. Additionally, if you've ever spent the summer in Charleston, you might notice that it's quite humid sometimes. And so you can actually see that water evaporate up, and then it might condense and precipitate down in a different part of the state or in a different country or over the ocean. So we also have water exit our state that way. And in Charleston, our water goes out to, so this is the Canal River right here, goes through the Canal River, dumps into the Ohio River, and you can see that follows down into the Mississippi River, which is a major, major watershed basin. And actually 41% of the US their water drains into the Mississippi River. So we are part of that. And our water flows then out into the Gulf of Mexico. So we have a lot of people downstream of us. And if you look at this photo, it shows you how the Gulf of Mexico is very much tied into and part of the Atlantic Ocean, and also the Chesapeake Bay, which is up here. So all of our water actually flows out into the Atlantic Ocean from Charleston. So this makes us think about then, how clean is the water that is entering and exiting our state and our city? And that leads us into the different types of pollution that we work with. The one that I mainly work with is non-point source pollution, and another one is point source. So point source, as shown on this infographic, is really easy because it comes out of a pipe usually. This is permitted through DEP and a whole nother section of our agency. So they have permits to discharge a certain amount of pollution according to the size of the body of water and how clean and healthy that water is. These other things, as you can see, non-point source pollution can come from a lot of different places. So it can be from several places all at the same time, contributing different types of pollution. And it makes it really hard and mysterious to pinpoint exactly who is causing the pollution and how much they are causing. So this leads us into doing a lot of educational outreach and a lot of just talking with people about what causes pollution so that they can help us reduce it. Most of non-point source pollution is pretty accidental, just an education component that is missing.
Yes, so I have some examples here of some types of non-point source pollution. It is 100% what the stormwater in the city of Charleston deal with our stormwater and our pollution. The first type of pollution that is considered non-point source pollution is chemical pollution. And you can see on the top left, the oil sheen picture. Examples of chemical pollution are, of course, oil, gas, car fluids, grass fertilizer, detergents. I always say towards the end of the summer, sometimes people drain their pools, and that's going to be they don't realize that draining it into a storm drain is damaging because it has chemicals in there that we use to keep our pool water clean that does not belong in a storm drain or in our waterways. The second type is natural or organic pollution. And some examples of that are leaves, garden clippings, mud, pet waste. A lot of people don't realize that natural or organic items into our storm drains, into our streams and rivers dumped in there would be anything that would be that harmful. but it is. A stream or a river can manage the natural debris that falls on its riverbanks or stream banks, and that little bit of mud and silt or dirt runoff that comes from its banks. But when we start dumping from our homes grass clippings, in the fall we've raked our leaves, we have a lot of people that don't realize that does not need to be dumped in the storm drain. Not only is it, if everybody did that, excessive amounts of debris, it also can clog our storm drains and cause incidences of localized flooding. Interestingly enough, you can see in the second tier down to the left, there's a little orange spot there in a storm drain, and that's another example of some organic pollution. That's actually a pumpkin that we found in the storm drain. You'd be surprised what we find in storm drains, including money. And then to the right of that pumpkin picture is an example. That's a storm drain in Charleston. You can see mud, you can see stormwater, which is picked up dirt and debris, brought it to the storm drains, taking that dirt or debris down in the form of muddy water. And then you can also see examples of leaves and those types of natural things that have been picked up by the stormwater, by the stormwater and brought to the drain inlet. The third type of non-point source pollution that we deal with is litter or debris. And it's one of the biggest, really. Some examples are plastic, which we're going to talk about, cigarette butts, which are plastic. A lot of people don't know that. Wrappers, cups, plastic straws, plastic bags. The two pictures on the bottom of this page, you can see on the left, that's actually at the mall. And somebody has, I'm assuming, maybe dumped their cigarette ashtray out, or it's a smoking place people stand, perhaps, but there's a lot of cigarette butt litter. Cigarette butts are small enough and light enough that they'll go right down the storm drains with just a little bit of water. And to the right of that picture is a storm drain inlet that was on the East End. We see these all over, though, nothing against the East End. It's everywhere, Canal City, West Side, that you can see the amount of plastic litter and debris that has washed into that storm drain. We periodically have to clean them out because of that litter. And that's what we want to talk a lot about, actually, is not only litter and debris, but the problem with the plastic litter. So if you look at the history of plastic, and you look at, of course, 1917, as you can see on this graph, and we start to hit 1957, we start to do a rise in plastic. In 2017, we produced over 400 million tons of plastic, which, if you compare that to even 20 years ago, we had produced not even 200 million. We've more than doubled. Plastic is used to make fast food, bags, water, bottles, toys, flip-flops, cosmetics, and more. It's used to do a lot of great things as far as the medical industry, things like that. But our big problem really is with our single-use plastics. So this is a great visual. This is an artist. He actually lives in Ohio, but he has some ties to West Virginia. And he is a photographer. He wanted to bring some awareness to pollution, our trash that we produce. He asked families to keep their trash that they produce for 1 week, and then he put the trash in the water and put them in with the trash to take the picture. One's got water, I think the other one's a snowy picture. But it really hits home how much trash we produce and how much we're responsible for putting back into our landfills and planet. So the more plastic we use, the more plastic we lose. You can see this, the USA, the average shopper uses 365 to 500 plastic bags in a year. It's actually closer to 500. In Denmark, the average shopper uses 4 plastic bags a year. So we have some better things we need to do. 2.3 million tons in 1950 of plastic was produced. 162 million tons in 1993. and 448 million in 2015. And last year, the Coca-Cola company finally acknowledged just how many bottles it makes a year. It's 128 billion. So trash has a path. Where does it start? Sometimes it starts as in the top left picture here, as really this is bad housekeeping, but not always intentional, not necessarily thrown out the window like a cigarette butt or a cup thrown out the window. Sometimes it's just improper management of the trash. Dumpsters that are overflowing, animals get in them, strew stuff along the way. Then a rain comes and washes that into our drain inlets. As you can see on the right top picture, that's more of a intentional dumping. We see it all over Charleston. Somebody's moving, or I don't know for what reason, they've just dumped some bags on an empty lot, and then animals get in them. Sometimes the bags aren't tied properly, and we get that kind of illegal dumping, we call it, that leads to, on the bottom left, you'll see a drain inlet. And that drain inlet in the curb with the of course, that has been washed there with another rain. It can very easily go down into the drain, and then you end up with a situation like the one on the bottom right. So we've got some parts of that to highlight for you. It's really interesting, really cool to me. The first synthetic, if we're looking right here, you see that pool ball. The first synthetic polymer plastic was invented in 1869 by a man who was inspired by a New York firm's offer of $10,000 for anyone who could provide a substitute for ivory. Why would we want a substitute for ivory? All pool balls were being made of ivory. It was actually, the invention of plastic was really like an answer to an environmental problem, because we were using so much ivory to make pool balls and to make combs for your hair, for instance. So the first plastic was invented to decrease that killing of elephants and the use of their tusks. Then in 1907, Leo Baekeland invented Bakelite, which you all might have heard of Bakelite, the first fully synthetic plaster, meaning it contained nothing natural, no molecules naturally found in nature. So World War II, 1939, there was a great expansion of the plastic industry in the United States. They needed to preserve the resources and made a lot of our war time objects out of plastic and used this as a alternative to steel, wood, etc. Plastic production during World War II in the United States increased by 300%. And everybody was thrilled. It was really answering a call, they felt like. 1955 marked a time of a throwaway lifestyle. TV dinners, things you could use a napkin or use a plastic fork and not have to bring it back in your basket and wash it up. Containers that were easy to microwave and reheat things with. It was just kind of becoming this, it was like a, just a little bit freeing. Everything could be, used easier and thrown away. And when you went to work, you didn't have to bring that box back. You could just throw your plastic away. 2018, 40% of the 448 million tons of plastic produced every year is disposable single use. So some of these items that we have that are designed, for instance, the Kroger bag, not picking on Kroger, but to bring your groceries home, that Kroger bag serves a purpose depending on how long you ride from Kroger to your house and get it inside, maybe 30 minutes, and then it lasts for 400 years in the environment. Straws, same thing, designed to last, be used for, a meal, one meal, throw it away. It's in our environment 400, 700 years. Styrofoam cups are the same way. So it's really something to think about. Single use is one of the biggest culprits in our pollution problem.
So how does this plastic production impact our planet? We know that we started producing it really quickly. So what were the results of that? So plastic is made up of a synthetic polymer. Like Leanne was saying, it's not derived from natural elements. It's made from petroleum oil and it's man-made. So it's not something that we would find out there naturally, which means it's not going to break down naturally like cardboard might or a paper product that is not a synthetic polymer, but a natural polymer. What we're starting to realize is that these bits of plastic, they take a really long time to break down. And what they break down into are just smaller bits of plastic. So it takes 450 years for plastic to break down into pieces that we cannot see. But that doesn't mean it goes away. It just means that it's broken down into a thing called microplastics. So types of plastics that we cannot see with our eyes. So this was a little alarming to folks when they started to realize this. And we know how our rivers connect us to our oceans. So if we look at how our currents flow out in our oceans, there's these things called gyres that are formed. So we have the North Atlantic Gyre, the South Atlantic Gyre. I think there's 6 or 7 of them across the planet Earth. And they're essentially just little swirling pots, if you want to imagine them, mixing the water together. And this is really important for our wildlife. It's very important for our weather that this happens. And we have these different warm and cool currents. But what we're starting to see is that they're an excellent place for these pieces of plastic to hang out together, to kind of find a place to stay. And one that gets a lot of attention, because it's over next to California, is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And this garbage patch, the size of it is changing, but it's at least twice the size of Texas, if not much more than that. As the currents change and the weather changes, the size of it tends to change a little bit. But it's essentially just a conveyor belt that circulates the water. And since we have plastic now in our water, it now is circulating plastic. And some areas of it are really concentrated with plastic, and it goes down several hundred feet into the water. And then other areas, it's just on the surface of the water. So it's kind of like a soupy mix of plastic out in our ocean. So you have 5 major gyres. Sorry about my misspeak earlier. But some of these pieces of plastic are even microplastics, so we might not be able to see with our eyes just how big they are because the pieces of plastic are so small. And about 46% of the plastic out in the ocean is made up of fish nets. So they're plastic fish nets, and then they also will entangle other bits of plastic, and it will kind of float along in the ocean. And I think in the United States, we tend to think that, this plastic getting out into the water isn't something that we're part of, because we have recycling, we have trash pickup. So we do a pretty good job of managing our landfills, for the most part, maybe compared to some other countries. However, we are one of the highest users of solid waste generation. So we generate a lot of solid waste. So we are asking other people to make solid waste so that we can use it. And then maybe we're not always properly disposing of it. Or maybe these other places where some of this is created, some of these plastic items are created, maybe they're not as environmentally sound as some parts of the United States. So we're definitely a major player in this. And I hope that our country really starts to step up to help address this issue. Because if you look anywhere across the world, nobody wants to go to a beach that looks like this. It's not safe for swimming or for fishing or for kids to play. If you're trying to attract tourists, you're not going to attract people with a bunch of trash on your beach. Also, it's incredibly harmful for the wildlife. And it's not just aquatic wildlife, but also squirrels and deer and other animals that we see on the land. And we're starting to notice now that almost all birds, especially shorebirds, are starting to ingest plastic, which is really a pretty awful thing. And animals are getting, caught up in the netting that is a big major part of these garbage patches. And folks are starting to realize this, and they want to draw attention to it. kind of like we are, because we think it's a major issue and it's something that we can help reduce. It's something everybody can help reduce. So this is an artist's rendition of a well that has passed from consuming too much plastic. And this is something that is unfortunately actually happening. But this is just an art piece to demonstrate that animals cannot digest plastic. We, who are also animals, humans, cannot digest plastic. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. So just to recap a little bit, people use plastic for all kinds of different things, and maybe they litter it, or maybe the wind or the rain blows it into storm drains or out into a river, and then those rivers dump out into our oceans. Animals then can ingest it or get entangled in it, or it can break down into microplastics. And a lot of the commonly found plastics are single-use plastics, ones that only get used for one event.
So I feel like, did we bum you out? Don't be, because it's happening. It's happened, and change can only start, once we know, can only start with you, can only start with me. As Tommy said earlier, we are all upstream of somewhere and downstream of somewhere else. Here's another example of what some people are doing. This is a machine that skims small pieces of plastic and larger ones too off the surfaces of water. You see these in coastal towns a lot. There's plastic bag bans that are going on throughout the United States. Once again, I feel like it's very common in plastic bags. There's sometimes a total ban in the state. You can see that in the dark red, California. There's regional bans, sometimes counties, etc. And then sometimes cities have a ban that is exclusive of the rest of the state. But banning single-use plastic bags is one thing that we can do. So what else, what can you do to help? Stop using plastic bottles, recycle plastic bottles whenever possible. Stop using straws. Maybe if you just did it for a month, maybe longer. Use reusable bags or paper bags, which incidentally, the reusable bags are actually the biggest thing you can do as far as those two options. Paper bags take just as much energy and resources to produce, and they actually they are not shipped they're not as easily shipped on a truck. You can't get as many paper bags as plastic. So if you use reusable bags, your own bags, you're really doing a lot more for the environment than even paper. Donate old toys to secondhand stores. Participate in stream or roadside cleanups, and most importantly, do not litter. In Charleston, this is some of the things we do. We have the Charleston Stormwater Program, and of course, we have a Facebook page where we post not only what we're doing, but what maybe other cities across the state are doing, or information about pollution, stormwater pollution. We try to bring awareness to it. Here we participated in the Downtown Open that Charleston Area Alliance had last year by making a putt-putt, and I made that putt-putt hole, that fish, out of all single-use plastics, bottles, bags, straws, etc. And that's one of the things that we like to do, is kind of get the word out there and to raise awareness. And I see we have a couple chats. Tommy, you want to wait till the end and then we'll get to those?
Yeah, if that's okay. I think we just have a couple more slides to go.
Okay.
So if you want to help us remove plastic out of Charleston, maybe you have spotted a place where you drive by there, or maybe you recreate there and you see plastic there, and you wish it wasn't there. Well, you can always take action to pick that up. REAP and West Virginia Make It Shine are two West Virginia DEP programs that we have, and they will supply you with REAP bags, gloves, and litter pickers. And then also we can remove that trash from you. Just drop it off at a certain site. So this is just an example of some folks cleaning up along the Kanawha River. And of course, we know with social distancing guidelines, it won't quite look like this, But if you go walking every day, you can always take a bag with you and pick up whatever trash you find. Little acts like that really go a long way. So we'd like to invite you to bring awareness to this issue by participating in the Funky FestivALL Fish Find. This is listed on FestivALL's event page. So if you go to FestivALL events and just type in Funky FestivALL Fish Find, you'll find that. Our webinar was listed on there, and then also our YouTube video of how to make it and instructions on how to build one. So you can take 2 plastic bottles and make a fish, and you can share an important message for your community to see. So this is an example of one that Leanne made. And you just put it out just like the teddy bear hunt, so that other people can see your fish. And if you spy one, you can always take a picture and share it online and hashtag FestivALL Fish Find and let us know how many you can find. So this is a fun thing for your communities to do to raise awareness to this, and also for the youth to participate in. And on this page, you'll see the link right down here. This is the list, the supply list and instructions, and the video. So if you click on those, this is what it looks like. This is the top part of our instruction list. And this is our video. So you get to see Leanne making one of these fish and a little bit more about the program at the end of it. And again, that hashtag is FestivALL Fish Find. And one other thing that we are part of with FestivALL is the ice cream and the arts in Elk City. So we're doing a virtual coloring contest. And as you might notice, it has a bit of a single-use plastic undertone. So we're trying to get people to think about their community, to think about single-use plastics, and to think about their environment that we all live in. And if you'd like to enter the coloring contest, you can just visit cwvmainstreets.org, and you can download one of the posters there. And they're also at several local businesses on the west side. So we just want to say thank you for coming today and for helping us keep all the water clean for the beautiful life that we have here on planet Earth. And of course, that means us too, humans, right? Take a picture of your fish when you make one, and it's, you know, anybody can do it. You don't have to be in Charleston. You don't have to be in West Virginia. So just help bring awareness to that the plastic pollution would be wonderful.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing him and spread the word. And thanks, you guys. I really appreciate you being a part of our webinar today.
All right. Everybody have a nice morning leading into the afternoon here. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.